Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
Hello, hello. My name is Ann Monell. I'm with the Healthcare, and I'm also on the leadership team for the Women's Employee Resource Group. Just want to say thank you all very much for being here this evening. So why are we talking about this? Why is the Women's ERG talking about this topic today? Well, fun fact, if you will, is that the oldest female, often, not always, but often the oldest daughter in the family is the one who is taking care of the parents. So in my situation, I am the youngest child, but I am the oldest and only daughter. So guess who's got all the plans for mom? I'm the one who's doing that. So this is very personally important to me. It's funny, I was telling my mom on the way over here, oh, we're going to talk about creating a care plan. She goes, well, you can talk about me. So, but this has really prompted me to start having those conversations with my own mother. It's prompted me to talk to my husband, to have those conversations with his parents. And I think from the number of folks who are here today, I think this is on a lot of people's minds. So we are so very grateful to have this esteemed panel with us today. How this is going to work is each of these fine folks are going to tell a little bit about their area of expertise, so you'll know kind of who's here and what types of questions might be appropriate for this conversation. I'm going to field a few, I'm going to give them some preliminary questions, and then we're going to open it up to you all. When you're doing your questions, I do just ask, please try to keep them a little more general. You know, if we're getting very, very hyper-specific to your situation, it just might be difficult to carry on that conversation, but I know our panelists are welcome to stick around and answer your personal question as much as they can. I also want to call attention that in the back of the room, we have a resource table. They have some of the folks that brought some resources, and we're going to have a couple other people from Norton share some information that they've brought today specifically to share with you all. So I want to thank and introduce all of our fine folks who are here today. So we've got Mary Kate Probst, who is a pharmacist, and she has brought her compatriot with her, one of her pharmacy interns. Emily Morales. There we go. And so Kate is going to talk about that as an issue that comes up with parents. I know I had this issue when it comes to medications. When my mother had surgery, I told you I'm going to talk about my mom. When my mom had surgery a year ago, we ran into a challenge transitioning from the hospital to rehab, and there was a discrepancy in what medication she was supposed to be on and what she had already had that day and whatnot. My mother is very attuned to her medications. Shame on me that I was not, because I was trying to talk to people and I could not advocate on behalf of my mother because I was not aware. Luckily she was. If she had not been, we could have been in a really serious situation. So Mary Kate can talk about that. Vicki Ragland is a state planning attorney with Ross Brown Todd, so she can talk a little bit more about some of those future planning issues. We've got Misty Van Treese, who is an elder law attorney. Man, I don't even, you know everything there is to do with caring about the elderly, I swear. So she can address some of those issues. And then we've got Janet Riley here from US Bank Wealth Management, and to talk about the issues she's been in her area regarding finances for parents. Again, another touchy issue, I'm sure. So I'm going to let each of them tell a little bit more about their area and their story, and then I'm going to start with some questions. So go ahead, Kate.
Thank you very much, Ann. As she said, my name is, I go by Kate, but I've been Mary Kate since I was a little girl, so I answer to either. I'm a pharmacist. I've been a community pharmacist for the predominant portion of my career. I've worked for Norton Pharmacy. I've worked with Walgreens Pharmacy. I actually worked for the VA Pharmacy as well when I did my specialized training, my residency. And now I found myself as a faculty member at Sullivan College of Pharmacy, where I actually spend one day a week. One of my days, the practice site is devoted to meeting with the hospice group and working with specifically geriatric medication lists and looking at medications. We don't just look at deprescribing, we look at the best medication fits for patients at that very late in stage planning time in their lives. But I also have a component of my practice that's devoted to medication therapy management in general. And right now, a lot of our focus on medication reviews does tend to focus on transitions of care. So times when patients are transitioning maybe from the hospital to the home setting and then anywhere in between, such as rehabilitation facilities. There's a lot of opportunities for both errors and omissions and things that having another set of eyes looking over is always kind of a nice addition to that medication plan. And so that's a lot of what I do and what I teach now pharmacy students to kind of be on the lookout for. The geriatric population is one that is a bit underserved and underrepresented, especially when we think about like medical studies and that sort of thing. So we really put a focus on that, and that's what a lot of my training is dedicated to. And I thought it would be helpful because last time I participated in this, we had a lot of questions, very specific questions that if we don't have time to get to, that's why I brought Emily O'Reilly. She's one of the residents on my rotation right now. She is a PharmD, but she's doing that additional year of kind of advanced training, and so she'll be here to help as well. So happy to be here. Yeah.
Hi, I'm Becky Ragland, and I practice solely in the estate planning area, and that is I work with individuals to decide what it is they want to do with their assets during their life and when they die, and if there are tax issues for transferring assets or administering assets, I advise on that. I first started in this area as a trust officer at National City Bank, and so I have a kind of a first-hand knowledge of administering trusts and dealing with fiduciary issues when you have assets that are held in trust for someone. The other part of my practice is I do a lot of estate administration and work with individuals once their family members have died, and advising them how to make sure that the assets go in the right direction, and if there are complications or if people don't get along, I get involved and do a little bit of estate litigation, and so that's my practice in a nutshell. I've been doing it for 20 years, and there's very little I haven't seen, but there are lots of new things every day that keep my life interesting.
Good evening, I'm Misty Clark Van Treese. I'm an elder law attorney. I'm a partner at Kentucky Elder Law. So we're located right over here on DuPont, so right at the back entrance. If you come out that way, you see my office every day. So I am an elder law attorney, and I also am a caregiver for my parents. So I'm not the oldest daughter, but I'm the youngest and closest to them. So, and I'm an elder law attorney, so they all just go, "Isn't this what you do?" And then that's what I end up with. But I take care of my parents too, and they live in Shelbyville. My dad has dementia. My mom is his caregiver 24/7, and we also have some home health that comes in and helps. They're almost 80, and they're in their 70s. My mom gets so mad when I say they're almost 80. We're in our 70s. So she's in her 70s. And it's just interesting to have sort of a convergence of my professional and my personal life. What I do as a profession is I help people navigate these issues. And there's different components. One thing that we both do is help people deal with issues of maybe they're going to have a period of time where they can't make decisions, and we want to set up something like a power of attorney, a healthcare power of attorney or surrogate document, living will, so that end of life decisions, trust, anything that might be helpful like that. Beyond that, what I try to help everybody get prepared for is how to interact with the systems that are out there that help us pay for care. And that's a big element of what I do. So there are some basic ones. The Veterans Administration is one. So we talked about the VA pharmacy, that's the VA Health Administration. There's also a Veterans Benefits Administration that can often give people, just give them money every month to help pay for assisted living or home care that many wartime veterans and their surviving spouses have no idea about. So I can tell them how do we get you qualified, how do we get this money coming in. Medicare, of course, we all hear about it, but what does it pay for skilled care? I can help guide you through that rehab benefit that's very valuable, but not long-term. Long-term, we're really looking at insurance or Medicaid. And there's a lot of misinformation about Medicaid. People get their Medicaid information from the hairdresser and from the lady down the street. And neither one of those people have it all right. There's a lot of misunderstandings about when you should get things done. People think you have to be broke, and that's not true, particularly in spousal situations. We have a lot of savings that are just built into the law itself. We don't want to impoverish spouses. There's a lot elder law attorneys can do to help preserve assets. People hear about this 5-year look-back rule and they don't know what that means. I can advise on what that means and how to prepare for it or how to deal with it if we're past it. It's never too late for us to do something. That's kind of where I get in there, and I just try to figure out what can we do, how can we help do a couple of things. The big ones are get the care that we need, and the care that we want. So what is the place, what is the level, what is it that we're trying to get, and how do we pay for it? How are we going to make that come into play? And then are we going to have the right decision makers in the right places so that it's a smooth transition as we age? So that's kind of what I do, and try to be everybody's sort of guide through that time period. I work with all these kinds of people all the time to make that happen, because we need income and we need administration after death and making sure we've got all that set up. And polypharmacy is always an issue. So we're also doing, dealing with all of those different aspects. So I'm just kind of your tour guide.
And I am Janet Riley, and I am with Private Wealth Management at U.S. Bank. And that really encompasses banking, financial planning, wealth planning, estate planning, and trust. However, I started out actually with my career in 1982. Some people may not have even been born then, I don't know. But over the years, it's really developed into a lot of, helping people, no matter if they have high wealth or not, but just being prepared, having checklists, being able to know how to help manage their money and preserve it. And we work with Becky a lot during the years, and other attorneys in that regard, but really to help protect those assets. But there's so many easy things that can be done that people overlook, and oddly enough, over the years, it seems like we've really been focusing on a lot of women issues. I've dealt so much with widows or divorced women that really, they never managed anything. It was always taken care of for them. And what do I do? And it's like, gosh, we have to have a list out, and you have to be able to trust somebody and have really a trusted advisor or someone that can help you. I think probably my most complimentary, or the biggest compliment I had throughout the years was one of my good clients, and he was a physician, and he was literally on his deathbed, and his wife said, what am I going to do? What am I going to do without you? And he goes, just call Janet Riley. She'll take care of it. And I was like, well, but it was true. She was like, can I just call you? And I said, don't worry about it. We'll get it taken care of. And there's so many things that are simple, but it's so stressful when you're in that. So you have to really be with someone who cares. And really, it's not only for you and your aging parent, but be ready for your children to make sure that they don't have to go through that, and have things set out for yourself. Because when you talk to your parents or those, if they think you're trying to be, nosy, or it's an uncomfortable thing, you can always say, I'm doing this for myself, for my kids and your grandkids. And anyway, so that's been just really rewarding for me, is working and really helping people going through some of these really difficult times and being able to get through it.
Thank you so much. I think, as I'm sitting here, I kept thinking of all these other questions, but one of the things that I think a lot of people struggle with is kind of planning 101. Some of us may already have some things in place for ourselves or with our parents. Others may not. Those of us who are here, and we are talking about aging parents, but like you said, we need to plan for ourselves, because sometimes life happens. And last year I had two incidents, or just recently had incidents of people dying suddenly. One was 45 years old. So it's not always an elderly person that has to deal with these issues and to plan ahead. But luckily, I am in the luxury of trying to help my mom plan. So what are the things that all of us should be thinking about? What are those basic documents? You mentioned power of attorney. You mentioned living will.
So
what are some of those things?
Yeah, I always tell people there's 4 basic legal documents that really everybody over the age of 18 should have. but people don't get them when they turn 18, they get a Camaro or something. You know, you have a kid and all of a sudden you're like, I've got to do a will, or my mother-in-law will have my child. You know, you can start thinking of these things as you go through life, and you sort of pick things up. But really, a set of basic legal documents would include a power of attorney. You'll hear it called a durable power of attorney. That just means it's going to last even if you become incompetent in the future. A healthcare surrogate, sometimes called a medical power of attorney or a healthcare power of attorney. That's just up to whatever the lawyer wants to call it. There's nothing magic about those words. But somebody to make medical decisions for you if you're not able. A living will, so end of life decisions. Those, you know, do you want to be kept alive on life supports or a feeding tube if you're not going to get better if you're in a vegetative state. And then I say an up-to-date will, because it needs to be consistent with your life currently. I read a lot of wills that are from like 1978, right? And they say where, you know, your brother's going to take care of your kids, and I ask,
they're in college now,
or,
right?
or they're 50, right? So they're like, oh, that's your son, isn't he 53? Yeah, maybe that's not so, you know, up to date. So up to date, you know, make sure it's still meeting our needs as to what we need now. More complicated documents are trusts. Trusts are like buckets that you're going to put assets in for some reason. I mean, lawyers may have different reasons for drafting different ones. Some of them are to avoid probate court, you know, and not have to go through administration later. Some are to avoid taxes.
Others are to, if you have a child that can't take care of themselves, or if you don't think drugs, or you don't think that they can take care of themselves, or you have just, you really want to incent somebody to act a certain way. And we talk about all kinds of their benefits and their drawbacks to trust. But
the big one that we do from a long-term care planning perspective, there is a bucket, a trust, called an irrevocable trust. It is something that we can use for protecting assets for Medicaid purposes. So this is where you have that 5-year look back. There is a trust that we can use where we make a bucket and put something in it that we're really trying to protect, like a house that's paid off or some investments or something like that. We can put a lid on it, we can wait 5 years, and it can be protected from having to be spent down. Have you all heard of somebody that spend money down? Mm-hmm. We can protect assets from that using that kind of trust. But there are pros and cons to it. There is things that we really need to understand about it. It's not a perfect fit for everybody, but it is a possibility. But your basics are your power of attorney, your healthcare surrogate, your living will, your will. Right. Your trust or something elevated. We're trying to accomplish something very specific if we're getting into that trust world.
Great. Well, speaking of finances, something a little basic day-to-day, not necessarily let's talk about complex planning. But when do you have that conversation, or how do you have that conversation about the checkbook? If there are concerns that mom or dad may not be able to make informed decisions when it comes to finances, is there a standard that needs to be met? How do you make that determination? What's the process for that? Is there a process? How does that work?
So
I would look at if there's a power of attorney in place, I would look first at that document to see if it defines how it should be.
There's a stress, so there's a pressure point, right? So there's some parents who are like, I feel like I'm not doing such a great job, please take over. Those are not the majority of parents. The majority of parents are like, I put a diaper on you every day, and I don't know why you're up in my business right now. Like they don't necessarily appreciate that help. Or they're embarrassed about it, which is another thing that you will find is maybe they're starting to forget. And so then, you know, they realize, oh, they didn't pay this bill or this thing didn't happen. You know, one of the things I start working with people early on is like with their banking, try to get as much stuff set up in auto draft, like long-term care insurance payments. That's something I always make sure is auto drafted out. Things that I know we can take care of that way, we go ahead and set up that way. It's nice that they feel cooperative with the power of attorney, and the power of attorney can go ahead and maybe keep an eye on the accounts and make sure we don't see odd checks or things written. It's interesting, a lot of times it's the banker will call the power of attorney and say, your mom's or dad's been in here and they seem confused, they're trying to take money out and they don't even have that account anymore, or, you know, issues like that start popping up. There are some people that will never willingly stop doing it. The only way to stop someone from being able to do banking or handle finances or write checks is through guardianship court. I refer to guardianship court as the nuclear option.
Right.
It is not where we want to be, because it takes somebody's, all their rights from them. They become like a minor child. They have to be in the proceeding, and in Kentucky, we have a jury trial on every single one of them. So it is not fun, and it's more expensive, the
And
administration.
it takes a much longer. Everybody thinks, oh, it's emergency. Well, there are very few emergency guardianship issues.
I think there's an easy way, though, of talking before it gets to the point where they're in bad shape. And then you can say, hey, mom or dad, do you think I could get your password for the online banking? Then you can go in and check on it. And if they feel comfortable with that, and many times they will, it's like, well, if something ever happened, I would need to know. And that way you can check on that even on a daily basis if you're interested. But almost everybody is on online banking now. Even not everybody, but many people are. So that is one easy way to get a better handle on it. Even if they don't do online banking, they can be set up on it so someone else can look at it. But that usually is an easy way to kind of get in and check, but not be intrusive and saying, I'm going to take over the checkbook and write it, and automatics are always a good thing to do. But having that conversation sooner, because once they start, my mother had dementia with Alzheimer's, whatever, but she really, they get so paranoid. They don't really, they don't mean to, and they don't know. My mother was so sweet, but she was like, they're stealing, why do you want that? And luckily, I had already had access to it years before, so it really never was an issue.
That loss of control, I think, they feel like sometimes they're losing control, and it makes them more paranoid, more concerned about, what's happening. But I always try to talk to people when I'm setting up power of attorney, I try to tell them, we're gonna name somebody that you really trust, and you're gonna sign this power of attorney, and it's gonna go into effect now. And that's okay, because you can see what they're doing. You can trust them. If you don't trust them for while you can see what they're doing, do not name them for when you're incompetent. That does not make sense. So we want to name somebody you trust, and that way, go ahead and get that relationship started. And I'd say go ahead and get them on the bank account named as a power of attorney. Now, I'm not working with people who are in their 30s or 40s. I'm working with people who are 60s, 70s, 80s. They're older. So a lot of times they're already looking towards, I want to do that, or I want to get that person on there.
So I'm curious, when you all have helped set up the power of attorney, because you're painting a wonderful picture with the parent and the one child who is now named power of attorney. But POA child may have siblings, and siblings may resent the fact that someone has been chosen as POA. I'm just curious, do you have advice for that? Because I see a friend of mine going through this, that her brother and sister are extremely resentful of now all of a sudden she knows all the money mom's been giving them over the years, and she's cut them off and said that's not appropriate. You've been manipulating mom for all these times, just on and on. But it's been painful to see them go through that, and I just didn't know if you had any advice to prevent that.
I think if you have a family that really gets along well and all of that, I'm always of the opinion that the more information that you can provide, the better. The better off you are for yourself. Now, in these situations like that, you just got to make sure that you are very much documenting what you do, and realizing that it's not your money, and you're using the money for the benefit of somebody else. And if the other siblings come around and say, I don't think that you should have done that. If you've done the activity, like you brought in home health care, for a spouse, for a mother or a father, and others think that you have spent too much money. That's one thing, versus if you instead, you've like gone on a vacation with a mother and then brought your whole family and used the money for that purpose. I mean, I think if you just keep an idea that it's not, it's, you know, you're using the money for the benefit of the parent, and not, it's not your money to, and it's not your money ever until they die. So.
No, that makes sense. So documenting it, if you're the POA, make sure you're documenting everything you do. Now, a lot of what we talked about, there have been some incapacitation, kind of pre-end of life, but sometimes there's just health transitions. So a parent might have surgery, it might be a temporary situation. That's where I think the medication, that transition for medication, I'm wondering if you could give some advice on that, because that's where I know I fell down. I would love to hear some advice on what I should have done.
Sure, so you talked a little bit about planning 101, so just like the basic type of premise to have, so even before you maybe have something like this, a planned surgery. So in their world, it's a lot of documents, but it's as basic as a medication list. So anyone could get this potential access for their parent, for themselves, to keep it on hand. And like you said, it needs to be up to date. It can't be old, it can't be maybe the combination of things they're getting from, you know, this pharmacy or that pharmacy. You kind of have to make sure that it's everything over the counter, every medication that you're either helping that person, assisting them, keeping that. And so we have a lot of patients that we recommend keep it on their person, like as a pocket card. But pretty much at any point, any pharmacy service has to either provide you access to the medication list, and if you're not the official power of attorney, they can actually mail it to your family member's home. So if it's on file that they have a certain address, they can mail it to that address without having to go through maybe that healthcare surrogate or healthcare proxy form. They can mail it to the parent or whoever you're working with to get that up-to-date list. So they do have to provide that. The other great service that is required now, at 65 and older, if you're actively working with a Medicare Part D as in drug plan, they do have to offer some kind of free medication review service. And this is normally provided by a pharmacist, but it doesn't have to be. It can be provided by a community pharmacist, a nurse. It could even be someone that's almost like an agent of the insurance company, but they have to do the due diligence almost to collect this medication information. And then they work with you and the patient to get everything kind of compiled. And part of that is providing this free medication list. And it can either be sent to your home again. It can be sent even via email sometimes. We've seen some really sophisticated systems. It kind of depends on the Medicare Part D plan that you use. But what happens is you've got this now access from the person who's pretty much in charge of seeing, you know, what you're billing and that sort of thing. And it really helps you get an idea of everything that they've gotten. And I think it can be kind of the most comprehensive way to do that. The big thing that I think is generally missed on that is the over-the-counter medications. And some of these cash pay only type of situations. I don't know if that's something you guys are familiar with, but the $4 generic list or the $4 out-of-pocket pay list has kind of added a little bit of a problem because we miss a lot of those medications that would have otherwise showed up on these lists. But that's a good way to kind of start, and then from there, use that list at every single transition of care, because although electronic health records have simplified for healthcare providers the documentation portion, unfortunately sometimes they tend to grow and grow and grow and never get minimized. And I know anyone who has access to any of the electronic health records that we use, I've used a lot of different variations. I utilize the one with Hospice, which is Suncoast. I've used Epic, I've used Cerner. They all have the same great thing about being able to collect every piece of data that was ever written about this patient, but they also tend to get a little messy in terms of no one is wanting to go in and clean anything up and take something out that might be important for a future provider to look at and read about. So in my experience, your list that you keep for yourself is oftentimes going to be much more up to date and much more clean than the list that can be kind of existing in these electronic health records, which are sent behind the scenes when your loved one is going to and from different rehab facilities or different pharmacies, or even now adding specialty pharmacies into the mix where you have other kind of high-cost medications. It just adds another element of being able to have something lost in translation. So having that list, I think, is one of the most important planning. I can speak to Norton's also my chart, which I don't know if you guys hopefully know about it, but as a healthcare surrogate, you can get also information to get online and be able to view up-to-date medical information, and you can see firsthand what's on that medication list and some of the important information that they either write about your loved one, or also you can send instant messaging, which is really the most accessible healthcare providers have ever been, at least in my experience. So it's a way for you to maybe use some of your healthcare background, I mean, whether you have a lot of healthcare background or not, to be able to almost advocate for your loved one, because you can see a lot of what's going on and you can ask very specific questions at any of these appointments. So I think it really empowers the caretaker role. I know I do it for my children, but I also have it for my parents, so I can go in and say, well, these are the questions you need to ask at your next appointment. We know your med list, like, why does it say this? Why does it say you're due for this kind of thing? And just give it as a guide to kind of use as like a reminder or a backup. So that's one of the key ways.
Well, and I would say another, just to live and learn, is when you're leaving the hospital, sit down and have a conversation, and not say, oh, the records are being sent over, it's fine. Sit down and go over it with the discharged person to make sure you have written down your own record of what has transpired. And then when you get to the next facility, because in the case my mother lives alone, and so after she had surgery, she had to go to rehab center. And so then when we got to the rehab center, we needed to sit down and review it again and say, do you have the same information I have? And if not, let's figure out what's going on. And then also, I gotta give kudos to Norton, because the staff is so incredible about managing the medication when you're there. Rehab centers do not necessarily have the same level of diligence, and that was an issue. In my mother's case, it was pain, and monitoring that, and medications were not being administered appropriately. And so I had to go and, pull a mama bear and yell at somebody and sit on them until they got my mom's meds correct at the rehab center. But that was a big eye-opener for me to go from hospital to rehab, and the difference that is.
It definitely makes a big difference. And a lot of times you'll see certain facilities will do it very diligently, maybe at admission, but maybe not so much at discharge. You really have to have the admission and the discharge sit down conversation about reconciling things, because that's a big place at discharge where things are potentially added while you're in the hospital. Maybe you did need them for just that short amount of time and are never taken away. So what we tend to see is by the time that I get to my hospice planning phase, that it's not uncommon to have someone on 20 to 25 medications, just because they've compiled these medications. So even being open about, this wasn't something that they came in on or were taking when they came into the hospital, do we really still need to keep this on board? It's not offensive to ask those questions, and in fact, it can make it much easier on the provider to say, you know what, I'm glad you mentioned that. That wasn't something, if you think that everything is good to go, they'll take your advice, they'll answer your question pretty openly, and it prevents this, what we call prescribing cascade, where we end up adding another medicine just to treat the side effects of an existing medicine that was maybe only on board for a temporary short amount of time. And so that's a lot of what we're doing, is kind of going through and seeing what are the symptoms that are truly present, what do we really need to treat, and what maybe was added and we don't even have a real reason or indication for that medicine. So a lot of times having a loved one be the person that brings up that conversation, which I'm open to stopping some of these medicines, or I'm open to looking at this medication list and seeing what we can possibly minimize or make it easier to recognize. We call it pill burden, but if that conversation is started by a loved one, it's that much easier to work with all the providers and nurses that are involved to say, like, we're not the pharmacy bad guys, we're not trying to just police it, but we really want to make sure everything that's on board is actually meaningful and is actually giving you benefit at this point. Maybe not the same benefit it was giving you 20 years ago. So you're not the same patient, you have different needs now. So we really take the time to kind of look at that in depth, but having that conversation started by a loved one, it makes it that much easier to work as a team to really get the end result we're looking for. So.
And then on the medication list, I would also advise putting any medication allergies or their vaccine history. Those are two easy things to keep documented, that when you transition from institution or different doctors is important to have as well.
That's a great one. I heard a lot of terms thrown around.
Yeah.
We've said home care, home health care, assisted care, assisted living, long-term care, in-home care. Can you all just kind of talk about the nuances and what these differences are?
So there's what we call a continuum of care. So you start at home. So in home care, there is medical and non-medical. So medical is when they come in and they're actually, dressing a wound, or this is usually after a hospitalization. It is nurses, RNs coming in usually and doing this. For my patients who are needing personal care, which is what that means, is they need somebody in there to help them get in and out of the shower. They need somebody helping them get dressed, making some meals, doing some house cleaning, doing that kind of stuff. That's non-medical home health care. There are lots and lots of agencies, great agencies in town. You're looking at an average of $20 to $22 an hour. There's a reason, though, that you are looking at that payment. People say, well, I can pay, Sally down the street $10 an hour and she'll come down. The problem is you're not going to get the same benefit. You're not going to get criminal history checks, background checks, health checks. You're not going to have a sub. I'll just tell you a quick story. I needed to take my mom to a wedding. And I asked Mom, who's going to stay with Dad? She goes, don't worry about it, I've got it covered. I assumed she had called Home Instead, who is who they use. Later on, I was like, so when is Home Instead coming? She goes, I'm not having them. The lady that was going to watch the dog is going to watch your dad too. I was like, this is not great. And guess what? She was sick, didn't show up, whole big problem. But Home Instead saved the day. But don't be my mother. Do not hire the dog sitter. So that's home health care, and that'll help people stay at home much longer. For a lot of people to stay in their home environment. Use VA benefits to help pay for that. Long-term care insurance helps pay for that. Wealth management helps pay for that. The next step up is independent living or retirement living. It's kind of the same, except you don't live in your house anymore. You live at Brownsboro Park, or you live at the Forum, or you live at one of these places that has lots of social interaction. They provide the meals. They provide transportation. They usually do light housekeeping twice a month. And that's like linen change, that kind of thing. And lots of social programs, lots of, getting together for picnics and art and going to the track or whatever. And they have happy hour and all that fun stuff that I like to go to. For those, depending on the size of your apartment, you have your own apartment, you have your own space, and whether you have a 1-bedroom, a studio, 2-bedroom, whatever the size, depends on what you pay. But you may be looking at as low as $1,300, $1,400 a month, up to $4,000 a month if you have 2 bedrooms, 2 baths at some places. Above that's assisted living. So as you can see, we're kind of getting a little step different. Assisted living, they actually have somebody there who can help you take a bath, who can be at least standby assistance in case you fall, who are going to be able to help you get dressed and get ready, who is going to come in and do a lot more cleaning. They're going to provide your meals. They're going to do all those things, but you're starting to get help with what we call activities of daily living. Dressing ourselves, bathing ourselves, toileting or continence issues, getting in and out of bed, walking to some degree, those kinds of things. In Kentucky, next level up is something called personal care. The difference between assisted living and personal care, the best way for me to describe it is in assisted living, if someone needs eye drops, they can take their hand, they can help them aim, they cannot squeeze the bottle. In personal care, they can squeeze the bottle, okay? So they have a license to provide the medical treatment. But it's really assisted living plus. And you're getting into $5,000 to $6,000 a month that you're needing to pay. When people talk about memory care, when someone has dementia or Alzheimer's, it can actually fall in 2 different levels. It could either be personal care, where you're going to private pay for it, you got to have insurance, you got to have good wealth management. Or it can be skilled, which skilled is the true nursing home. That's where we get Medicaid benefits involved. And skilled care is the highest level. That's the nursing home. You are needing help with your activities of daily living. Feeding yourself, dressing yourself, bathing yourself, toileting continence issues, walking without a human assistance, transferring, getting in and out of bed to a wheelchair. When I was growing up, we called it the rest home. That is what we're talking about, is that level. Some communities in Louisville, well, in most places, will have every level. So you could start at their retirement community and progress on up as you need. That's great too for couples who one may not be doing as well as the other and they want to be close to each other. And then you have independents that are just assisted living, personal care, just memory care, just skilled. It just depends on what services they want to offer. But you're looking at skilled nursing care in Louisville, Jefferson County, $8,000 to $11,000 a month. would be what you would be looking for as far as cost, which is why when you look at people in Kentucky and nationwide at skilled nursing care level, 65% Medicaid is who pays. So it is the primary payer.
So I'm sure this has prompted lots of questions. But we're gonna have a comment from the
Yes,
gallery.
so, just so everybody knows, we're back here in the corner, and we're part of the resource table, but we're Norton Geriatrics and Norton House Calls. So you did a fabulous job of all the different levels of care, but there's one you left out, that if you're at home and you're homebound and you need a physician to come see you at home, you maybe live with your spouse who, you know, is fine and who can get around, but, you know, it's really hard for me to take my husband to the doctor, getting in and out, but we have Norton House Calls that will come see you at home for the homebound seniors. So I want to introduce Dr. Carmel Person, who is the medical director of our practice, and Sarah Sims is the manager, and then we also have our social worker, Sarah Melhorn, that we are also a resource for those that if your loved ones need home and, you know, personal care or primary care, and it's covered by insurance, in the home, that's always an option as well.
Thank you so much, Julie. That is fantastic. Oh, yes, Doctor.
Yeah, I could go through that, I don't say something, right? But first of all, you all gave just a wealth of information. I've been doing geriatrics for decades now, and I also lived it with all three of my parents. So I've been blessed with a different hat, and I think hopefully it's helped me with my perspective as I deliver care and provide care to our patients. With all that being said, I do want to make known, I think Norton Geriatrics and House Calls practice is the best kept secret in the Louisville, Jefferson County area. We are a full spectrum, across the continuum type of practice who approaches medical management and clinical support with our eye on the patient as a person. We're very mindful that we treat a human being and not a congestive heart failure with an EF of 20% that ends up on, was it 25?
20
You were being conservative. I was
I know.
thinking 33. I had the exact conversation with the patient's family today that came in, had moved across the different transitions of care, and he said, you know, there was a time my dad's on 2 memory pills, a total of 31 pills today, but you think you can get him off some of those? That was my exact conversation today. So, not to take up too much time, but I do want to sort of put a plug in for our Norton Geriatric House Call team. Our house call practice is not concierge medicine, but you might think it is, because we have very devoted nurse practitioners, and it's nurse practitioner driven with the oversight of myself and another physician. We certainly make ourselves available in the home when our nurse practitioner wants either the support, the collaboration, and or the family or the patient wants to see a physician. And so we can provide that service. Another benefit of the Norton Geriatric and House Call practice is that we can literally help our patients transition the different levels. You know, they might be appropriate for home care for the rest of their lives, or they might outgrow it. And if that's the case, we can help and provide that help with the transition by recommending the different levels, whether it's assisted living, we go to assisted living, we go to PC, we go to memory care, we go to skilled, we go the gamut. And our focus is to provide a seamless transition of clinical care and support from the very beginning until the very end. And we partner closely with hospice, and we have Sarah Melhorn as our social worker. Most of our nurse practitioners on average have been with us anywhere from 8 to 12 years, some more, some less. So we're a pretty cohesive group of folks that are very committed to our seniors in the Louisville area. So please don't hesitate to collect our literature back here. So I'm going to say, because I know it wasn't on the calendar,
No,
next time we'll be happy to be. But anyway, just wanted to make sure that everyone was aware of and we are medical. We're we bring the PCP geriatric clinical support, medical care to the home, or to the maybe community resident, or wherever the patient or where your parents might be.
What area do you cover, anything outside of Jefferson County?
Primarily, she's going to kill me if I say, well, sure, now where's your grandmother? Because I'll go. Well, we can go there.
Okay.
want to expand, but we just don't have the staffing to go outside of.
One thing I failed to mention, and I'm sorry, I know I don't want to take up too much time, but we have a TIC program. The TIC stands for Transitions in the Care Continuum, and it has been a baby or sort of a vision that I was formerly a nurse, and I would watch patients get all this care in the hospital. This was back in the days when they stayed in the hospital forever, and they would be on the ventilator and be in ICU, and then they would step into TCU, and then TCU, you all know and then they'd be back in the unit 4 months later, sicker than sick. And so, as part of that, and then part of our team's vision, we've come together, and Norton Healthcare has been very generous in supporting our vision. So the TIC program, or the Transitions in the Care Continuum, is a program that's focused on helping seniors or any patient that is complex and has multiple chronic conditions, maybe with acute exacerbations, where they've had to go to the hospital. We literally, physically follow them from in the hospital all the way back home, and their PCP gets a phone call from us as well as a report. So it's the same set of eyes, and it really has been a focus of the last 3 years of our practice and of Norton Healthcare. We're a partner now with Norton Audubon Hospital as well as Norton Brownsboro, and our hope is that we will extend our program to the other 2 Norton adult campuses as well.
That's fantastic.
I
Thank
had
you
to
for sharing
pitch
that.
the TIC.
No, thank you for sharing that information. So, I know I keep thinking of more and more questions, but what questions do you all have? Yes?
I just wanted to jump on that, where else can we go to call? You know, do you all reach outside Jefferson County, like to the metro areas? Because I have parents that live in Indiana, and I want to make sure that I have the same resources that I could get for my in-laws who live in Jefferson County. And I'm very curious to know, okay, so if I have questions about my parents, who do I call?
So
Like
for
you-
elder law, I mean,
Yeah.
my firm, we have 6 lawyers, 2 are licensed in Indiana, 4 are licensed in, well, everybody's licensed in Kentucky, and then 2 are licensed in Indiana, and then I have I offer, I'll get out in a minute, I open an office in Bowling Green too, so I actually have a physical location down there and then up here. But even people that live in, you know, West Virginia or wherever, I can always reach out. We have a network of elder law attorneys, and we can reach out and find, and we always know kind of who the respected people are in different communities. We can find that out and find who would be a good resource for somebody in the elder law or the estate planning context.
We have offices in Indiana, Ohio, Kentucky, Tennessee. There's one in Texas too, but it's the same thing. You know, we can, if we don't know the answer, we have a good network of group of people too as well.
Yes.
My mom and I actually went to your office, and we have the 4 documents that you all prepared for us there. My question is, she is starting to have some memory issues. We're not in a serious situation yet, but I can foresee, you know, things coming. She has a reverse mortgage. I don't know what is best for her when it comes to, of course, I want to be able to keep her in her home as long as possible. My mother is just on, you know, her Social Security, you know, she does not have a lot of savings. But I will say, in the reverse mortgage, it's like, she probably has, like if we were to sell the house today, let me just say this, there would be probably about 40 to 50,000 in equity in that. Now, the longer she lives, you know, that money dwindles down. I just don't know, I don't know, I just don't know where to go with this, because I don't know if she will have to go to an actual facility at some point. If that happens, do we sell the house and the money that's left over goes to, you know,
So let me kind of address it, let me kind of address it generally. And then you're gonna call, and we're gonna come in and talk about what's going on.
I don't want to get too specific, but I know
But
a lot
I
of
think
older
that's-
people now do have reverse mortgages.
That's correct.
That
So
would be
let me-
helpful to
let me kinda
understand,
talk
because I
about-
heard that on the news, that there's some,
Right.
looking at regulations or something around that.
Reverse mortgages, they got a really bad rap because they were not great in the beginning, and there was some sort of predatory lending practices that happened. They have really, and put a lot of regulations on them, so it's not exactly the way it used to be. But I think the more important issue is really about how does this work with our house if we need care later down the road. For a lot of people, their home is the most important asset they have because they worked so hard to pay it off and to make that, to have that achievement of it being paid off and all that, you know, that equity there, even if it's not a ton. What do we do? So the way you qualify for Medicaid is really going to be the big issue. So to qualify for Medicaid when you're a single person, so you've never married, you're widowed, you're divorced, in that situation, you only qualify for Medicaid to pay for your nursing home care, so just skilled care, when you have less than $2,000 in countable resources. Now the home is kind of a funny thing. They don't make people, you went to the nursing home, you've been here 4 days, sell that house. They don't do it that quick. They give you a 6-month period to see if you are able to improve and go back home. So during that period of time, no one has to sell their house. But after 6 months, they do expect it to be on the market and it would be sold. Countable resources for Medicaid purposes is everything a person has in their name, joint name with another person, doesn't really matter, except they don't count IRAs in Kentucky. They don't count 401ks in Kentucky. They don't count 403bs or any of those kinds of accounts, deferred comp, anything like that, which is great. Somebody could have some savings in there and still qualify for Medicaid to pay. But everything else is going to be countable. So in a situation with a home, when they may get to go, let's say they had $10,000 in the bank and the house paid off, they would spend the $10,000, that would take a month. They would go on Medicaid, Medicaid would start to pay. After the 6 months, they would sell their house. Now they have $100,000 from the house that they sold. They would come off of Medicaid. They would spend down again, and then once back below Medicaid's threshold, then they would go back onto Medicaid. Okay, so that's how it would work just generally. As an elder law attorney, there's a lot I can do to make that spend down not quite so painful. I can save about half of those resources. There's different ways that we can do that, but that is how it would happen. So if she ever needed care, after 6 months she would have to sell the house, but the reverse mortgage would require that anyway.
Right.
And then that money she would receive, she would come off of Medicaid. We might try to we'd talk about what we could do with that money, and then eventually she would return to the Medicaid program. Okay?
So could someone explain the reverse mortgage, just to make sure we're all on the
It's
same
just
page?
a chance for you to draw out your equity without, many times there's different ways to do it. You may have more, you know, you can draw it out and get monthly payments from it as income, like an income stream. You might be able to get a big lump sum out. There are different arrangements, but you don't have to pay anything on it, on many of them, or you pay a very little interest payment and that's it. And the thought is just that whenever you leave that house, whether it's, you know, because you have to go to care, you don't want to sell it, or you are deceased, at that point when it sells, the mortgage company will get repaid.
Yeah, Kat.
I just wanted to add on to what Misty said. The other great thing about going to an elder attorney too is that people don't think about, you know, when you're on Medicaid at the nursing home, they do take their Social Security check or their, you know, VA benefits or whatever. You're left with $50 a month.
40.
40.
50. What are you thinking?
I thought they were changing it to 50.
Yeah. No, but
40?
Indiana is 50. Indiana's 50 and Kentucky's 50.
So you have to put money aside for taxes, insurance, water bill.
If you still have the house, yeah.
If you
So
still have the house.
like floating those expenses, that's why I tell people, I'll be honest, I tell people if we really think mom or dad is not going to be able to come back home, there's really no point in holding on to that property because of the upkeep expense. And Medicaid's taking a lien on it. So it's not like you're going to get, I mean, if mom died or dad died, Medicaid's going to send you a letter. It's going to say, I'm really sorry for your loss, but now you must pay me $46,212, and we need it in the next 30 days. I mean, they're going to get repaid from that asset. So there's no advantage to holding on to it. Like you said, you're just spending money on maintenance you wouldn't otherwise have to spend. So it's a hard conversation, though. People don't want to sell that home. You know, that really hurts. So I think you had a question right here.
I did. So my mother has put me on every one of her bank accounts, and I think she's thinking that's a way of protecting whatever. We do not have a power of attorney. So I need to give her some good advice because she's thinking about moving into assisted living, and so I just don't know what to do with her money, or to help her do what she needs to do with her money.
But you are you joint
I'm
on the
joint.
account, so you're joint. So
On her account.
if she were to die because you're not a spouse, then it freezes unless it's pay on death, right?
Well, you'll be the
That's
owner.
how it used to be.
So that would be like, surprise, do you have siblings?
I'm
Well, that's good, because otherwise they would hate you. No, this happens all the time at the bank. So people go down and, they say, I want to put my daughter on my account so she can handle my business. And so they get put on as the joint owner, and then mom or dad dies, and suddenly.
I dealt with that exact issue this afternoon.
Yes.
And I'm saying, your mother didn't mean that, and that's really in controversy of her estate plan. So we've got to actually take money out of this account now and put it back. We got to tell all the siblings what happened, and it's an awkward conversation. To have to
I always tell them, it's like your son or your daughter, she's on this account with you. She may do the right thing, and she may write a check to all of her siblings because she loves them all and she loved you so much. Or she could go to the Bahamas and have the best weekend of her life, and that's going to be her money.
So you're comfortable with that, but your question is, what should you do now that you're helping her?
Yeah.
That's kind of where you want to look, kind of do a whole balance sheet, a whole financial statement to see what do you have every year, and do you owe anything? Some people have credit cards, but their kids don't even know it, because of course you can get them easily.
So if my mother was to pass away, I would be responsible for paying off all, and I don't mind,
No, not if you're not on the credit cards.
Okay, I'm not on that.
You're on the
You're on
checking
yes.
account, so you, yes.
That's the worst inheritance ever.
Okay.
But you still want to encourage her to get a power of attorney, because a lot of people don't realize, we have so many things that are transactional, so there may not be an asset, but you need to call the insurance company, you need to talk to them about her insurance, or you need to call the doctor, you need a healthcare document, or you need to, the electric company, the cable, all those people, they won't talk to you if you're not that person. So,
How do you have that conversation? I mean, you all have said that sensitive conversation about, because I don't want her to feel like I'm taking her independence. How do we start that?
I think a nice thing to say is, I'm doing this myself for my own family, and therefore, I learned all this, and I didn't know about it before, and these are, things that need to be taken care of. Have you done these? Just ask, and sometimes you find out that years ago they did a power of attorney, and a power of attorney, once until you revoke it, is still good, and so that's.
Tell them that you went to this fascinating panel discussion.
There we go.
Well, and this made me think of something I heard somebody else say at one point, to be cautious of divorces back with old powers of attorney or old documents, that it's amazing how a former sibling, or excuse me, a former spouse can even be like a healthcare surrogate, and if it hasn't been changed. Is that true? Did I hear that
Some
right?
things end with divorce. The worst thing that doesn't end with divorce is beneficiary
Designation.
designations.
Oh, yeah.
So people forget that their spouse was the 401k, and then the spouse is like, ching, I knew I could even one day. Take it
Or life insurance, that's on life
Yeah,
insurance, yeah.
Yes, back in the back.
Well, I come from, and there's 6 kids. Now, and my mother likes to be very fair. I'm gonna make you power of attorney, you in charge of my medical, you in charge of this. And we're trying to figure out if that's a good thing or if that's a bad thing. If it should all be one person handling it, to make it easier.
I'll give you advice. So I have 2 different documents, one for financial and one for medical, because I do think that sometimes I tell my clients, what I'm looking for with power of attorney is the person who's going to be good with your money. So they're usually good with their own money. We want them to, be in contact with you, be able to access your bank, those kinds of issues. With medical, I want somebody who's going to be level-headed in a crisis. If Helen gets hysterical when mom has a cold, she's not the right healthcare surrogate. These kinds of things. What I fight with my clients is they constantly want to appoint the oldest person, and I'm like, that's not,
you know, just because Billy's the oldest doesn't mean that he needs to be appointed. It was really important when they were like 10, 8, and 6, but now it's not so important. So I fight that battle. But I don't think it has to be the same one, as long as you guys get along, because it's going to be a project. You know, it takes a village. Because, you know, you can select where mom needs care, you've selected this great place, but if the person with the checkbook won't write the check, we got problems. So it's more about how you guys help the ones that are doing it get along. Can you work together to accomplish it?
And if you do name somebody that's jointly, make sure they act together and do get along. So don't, the two siblings that hate each other, don't put them as, you know, as the power of attorney or the executor. And
just kind of piggybacking on that, I know you said earlier, if you were the POA and you're the one writing the checks for your parents to document everything, if you're the sibling who isn't, and you are concerned about how money is being spent or if it's being used correctly, do you have any rights to audit the account or, you know, ask if you made something wrong?
Yeah, what if you think mom or dad made an error in judgment?
Well, I'm just, you know, just for your own peace of mind, or
Right.
just, you do have a question, do you have any rights if you're not designated as the POA to see what your sibling is doing with the account, or?
One, the document may give you some, so that's one. So it may say you must, you know, your person must provide information to the other people. There are lawsuits that can be filed. There's litigation that can be done. You know, if there's enough of a concern, like let's say mom, all of a sudden, you know, your brother won't tell you where mom's money is or what's going on, but he's at the boat every Friday night. I mean, at some point you may have to step in and get a guardianship because it's just too concerning.
Right.
And that does.
But without that, you really don't have any rights to a sibling or a family member to
You know,
really.
I will occasionally step in, you know, like let's say she's represented mom and is working with mom, and I have the daughter. I might write her a letter. Hey, I represent Sally, the daughter, and we're a little concerned about what's going on with mom. Can you talk to your client?
right, and my practice normally would say, I think it's in your best interest to let your sibling know what you're doing, especially, or I will look at what the sibling is doing and what my client is doing, and if my client's not doing anything wrong, I don't have an obligation to, you know, I'll talk a little bit, you know, but I don't have an obligation to turn it over to your client. But sometimes when you get attorneys involved, it's a little bit more, especially if it's somebody, you know, if
and see, just give me a heads up that this is like everything's okay.
right.
If it's a trust, now trusts are different. Beneficiaries are different.
Yeah, and sometimes you can ask your sibling or whomever to have the bank send a second statement each month. And that might be like, I just want to know what's going on, but it won't be as like
In an effort
checking
for
up on
transparency.
It's harder when there's 6, but when there's just a couple, like I tell the person who's been appointed, I was like, if I were you, I'd make a copy of the bank statement. Everybody gets it, and everybody sees, you know, maybe not every month, but once a year, or just so everybody can kind of see where things are going.
Yeah. Or if you are the named power of attorney, then, and you come across something and you think it might be challenged, ask your siblings, I'm going to do this for mom, I think it's in mom's best interest, to have a caregiver all night. And so,
Just
even
switch
though,
to 24/7 care.
Yes.
Just a question, one, do you make house calls? Well, I just become, my father's just lived with me, I've pulled him out from a very bad situation with a spouse, and I'm trying to navigate, but his health is not very good, and getting him out is horrible. But she basically took a lot of money out of their checking account and has hidden some accounts and will not give him access to his money. So I think there's some shady business going on. But if I'm the power of attorney, financial over him, does that give him the latitude to force her to share that information with him?
So
she's refusing to share information about where she's hid his money.
Yeah. So first of all, yes, most lawyers will go meet with clients at the home, and I have to. I do signings out at the hospital and the nursing home all the time, and I even have I have a crew of witnesses that go with me, and we go out. So that issue, there's a lot of complications there. So you, on his behalf, can try to figure out where there are ways that you can try and find where assets might be, where you can find them. But you can file for divorce.
He refuses for the whole divorce thing. We set him up an online account, and I finally got him to agree to an online account, which is when I found out she had pulled out almost $10,000 out of the checking account. And then took another $28,000 and hid it and will not tell anybody where it's at.
So one of the things, I've had that situation come up a couple of times. So with Medicaid, we talked about a single person. With married people, it's a different situation. So what happens is if somebody needs care, like if his care needs increased, he needs skilled care at some point outside of the home, what Medicaid is going to do is look at all their resources, and they're going to expect to see all of hers too. And everything she has access to, because it's husbands, wives, joints, doesn't matter. It's all going to be considered. They're going to let her keep the house if they have one, and half of the resources, and the rest will need to be spent down. There's some caps and some floors and things like that. But she'll have an obligation to support, to help pay for him if Medicaid's denied, because she won't give him information over. So sometimes I use that as a way to get the information.
I'm hoping as a nurse I could take care of him and do a lot of things that most people cannot. And if the assets are available to keep him out of the nursing home is what I really am hoping to use assets to do, the home health and this, sitters and those kind of things to help pay for, because apparently it's not cheap.
So what I did in recent cases, we called the husband, it was the husband in my case, and said, here's the deal. I know you don't want to pay. Obviously, I need the financial information so we can see what programs they qualify for. That's how I found out what they had and where it was. So that was step one. Then step two, how do you get her to give them back? That's a much harder challenge without getting into divorce. I don't really know how you do.
So he's basically screwed.
It's hard. It's a hard situation. I mean, it would certainly help you to have a lawyer call. When she gets a letter from the lawyer, it may change her perspective.
Janet, I have a bank question that I don't know if it's still true. So once upon a time, my mom said, when I die, before the body is cold, go to the bank, empty the safety deposit box, and get all my money out of my checking account or something like that. She was like, get to the bank as soon as possible to empty the safety deposit box. Is that still a true as
Yeah, it's gonna be frozen.
Yeah.
Okay.
Immediately, not even.
Okay.
As soon as we know, and
yeah.
they check the audits, and as soon as we find out, it has to be frozen.
Because I've got, she had me as a signatory so I can get it, but I guess it's only when she's alive.
That's why they say don't put your will in the safe deposit box, because no one can get it out.
Oh, that's good to know.
Yeah, POA ends at the moment you die. It's over.
Okay,
So
so
you can't go down
I
and
really
be like,
do need
"I'm
to go to the
off
bank as soon as, before you all know.
Right.
Okay.
She's still breathing.
Yes, but
So probate is over.
What if it doesn't?
You don't have to, or you'll never get in there. Unless it's, if you have a trust and it's in the name of the trust, then you should be fine.
Right.
Because
As
as
long
long
as
as
you're
your
a
name of the
trustee.
trust, you're gonna have a problem.
Or as you're a trustee or a beneficiary.
If you're a trustee.
Trustee of the.
But not if you're just a beneficiary.
Right. You couldn't.
Okay, so if you were named as trustee, you would be able to have access to it. So I saw a question, yes.
I have two questions. On the POA, does it have to be a relative?
No.
If the POA was written in 1978, can that be changed?
If the person has capacity or they're competent, sure.
Okay.
So, to do a will in Kentucky, you have to have a lucid interval. You have to know what you're doing when you're doing it. That's the standard. For power of attorney, it's the ability to contract, to form that agency relationship is what you have to have. So just because somebody has a diagnosis of dementia does not mean that they cannot do documents. But there will come a time during that disease where they won't be able to anymore.
Do they
So
just
what-
go back to the attorney that they?
Any attorney, yeah, they go to any attorney that does that kind of work and get a new document done.
So heaven forbid something should happen to a POA. Let's say mom or dad is incapacitated and the POA is hit by the proverbial bus.
Go to the guardianship court.
Wow.
So you don't put all your eggs in one basket with a POA, you need to have an alternate. So I named Sally, but if she can't do it, Ben, or.
And don't think just because, when something happens to Sally, I'll go back and do a new document.
Because that may be incapacitated.
Right.
Right.
So that would be all in one POA.
Right.
Can you have two POAs?
We don't do it, we don't, may name two people who can act, but I don't do two separate documents.
No, two people who can act in the same capacity.
Yes.
One doesn't have to be dead.
Yeah.
Okay.
One thing I get asked a lot is, well, I don't know why I have to have a POA, I'm married. My spouse can do anything I can do. They cannot. So just because you're married, it doesn't mean that you can access your husband's or wife's accounts. This is so hard. My parents have been married 58 years and they're like, I don't understand. Like they just don't understand this concept. I mean, like we don't know what my dad's signature is like. My mom just forged it for like 58 years.
Nobody else has ever done that.
Right. You know what I mean? They're just like, what do you mean? We're married. If you have IRAs, your 401ks, your health insurance is just in your name. I mean, there's all these things that are just in your name. People don't think about it. Spouses still need POAs, and then an alternate in that document in case you're in the same accident or you die. One of you will die usually before the other one. So we'll have an issue there.
That's a really good point, yes.
Y'all talked about benefits or the Medicare paying for nursing homes. What if they go into assisted living? Does Medicare pay for any of that?
So Medicare only pays for rehabilitation, those that short-term nursing home care after a qualifying hospital stay. So 3 admitted midnights with a rehabilitative discharge. You can get 20 days paid in full, and then another 80 days possibly, but only as long as you are still benefiting from the therapies and skilled care that you're being provided. People don't usually get 100 days, they get something less. That's it. Beyond, there's home therapy and home visits that you can get through Medicare, usually after a hospital stay. In the assisted living world, you need insurance. So you need something like a long-term care policy, or you're gonna need to get benefits from VA. So some of that money that I talked about being available from VA, that's great for people who served during wartime. Didn't have to get injured, just served during wartime,
Do they
or
have
their
to
surviving
serve
spouses.
overseas?
No, they could have been at Fort Knox the whole time. But if one day fell during a wartime period, they are potentially eligible to get money. And it's a significant amount. For a veteran and a spouse, it's $2,127 a month.
What if they didn't serve till retirement? They didn't
Doesn't
serve 20
matter.
years.
They have to serve at least 90 consecutive days.
How do you find out if somebody served that?
You order their discharge paper, and you can do that online, and it's free. So if you go and Google order DD214, DD214, it'll come up. You'll see a bunch of pay sites, ignore those. Go to the one that's the National Archives, and you can ask for a free copy of their military record.
And you don't have to have the POA in order to do that.
No, the veteran, if they're alive, their surviving spouse, or next of kin can sign this document. It's submitted electronically, and then you fax in the signature page. And then you get it within a week or two.
And I hope everyone heard the magic 3 days in the hospital. That was new learning, because I remember when my mom had her surgery, they wanted to discharge her after 2. I said, no, keep her 3. We need her in there for 3.
I was really annoying with my dad was in the hospital because I was like, has he been admitted? Has he been admitted? And they were like, I don't know. And I was like, well, check on that. And
I saw there was a question over here.
As far as long-term health insurance, does that pay for independent living at all, or does it have to be
depends on what the policy says. Most of them are going to pay home care, assisted living, or skilled nursing, and aren't going to pay for independent living unless you're getting somebody to also come in and do some things for you. And it's only going to be for that portion. It's not going to be for the room and board portion. So for most of them, it's assisted living or higher.
So let's all pull out our parents' long-term care insurance policies, or make sure they have one, or have one for ourselves, which I'm just gonna put a pin in that one. We're gonna have a little conversation about long-term care insurance in a minute, yes?
Right, my question is about life insurance policies. If you have to go to a facility at some point, what happens to those life insurance?
So Medicaid wants to know, is there any cash in there? So they're looking for cash surrender value of life insurance policies, because that counts as a resource. It's an asset. It's somewhere you can go and get cash. So generally, if someone has not paid for their funeral, we will use that policy to fund the funeral. It has to be irrevocably done. So that means that you can't go change your mind later. If it's a lot of cash, more than you need for the funeral, it's gonna be surrendered, we're gonna pay the funeral, and we're gonna have to spend down. That if it's a term policy, like something you get through retirement and it has no cash value, they don't care about it, they won't come and try and take it after death either. It is fine. As long as you have a beneficiary that pays to the estate.
Yes.
Who or what entity would be the best resource to help parents navigate the changing world of insurance after they retire? You know, I've got mom and dad, dad, you know, retired from General Electric. They've got Medicare, they've got supplemental insurance. They are trying to get the biggest bang for the buck and take care of themselves as well as they can, drugs, primary care physicians, all of that. So where's the first place they should go to kind of get all that straight? Because right now they're in the sense where, oh, we need to change this insurance company because, you know, they're getting expensive. I mean, their policy went up like $40 last month, and that's per month. So it's kind of like they're getting a little nervous about how much they spend.
So I can speak to the medication portion of that question for sure, and then it's a little bit also speaking to like the actual Medicare plan. So I would say your first stop would be the Medicare.gov website. And Medicare.gov is going to be specifically tailored to the medications that you're currently taking, and also you want to look at the ones that would be the long-term medications. So really just the ones that you'd be taking every single month. And you can put it in specific to your zip code, and it'll ask you a series of questions. It's kind of in layman's terms, like, do you have company insurance that you're going to hold on to kind of after? And then it's going to ask you, are you going to be Medicaid? And it'll say, like, do you think you qualify for Medicaid? It'll ask you a series of questions about that. So it kind of helps coach you through some of like the technical language if you don't really know what you qualify for. It'll help you prompt what your next answer is. And then it'll say, like, what is your zip code? And then it'll say, give us your medication, like your drug list. And again, this is not biased information. This is purely from Medicare.gov, so they don't do any type of, would you say, weighted bias. I mean, they won't even allow us to do these in community pharmacies because they want there to be no inherent bias whatsoever involved in the selection process. So when you do that, and you put in the medication list, you put in all your other information, it gives you a breakdown of every single Medicare Part D plan, D as in drug, but then it also talks about the premiums that you would pay for the actual medical plan. So that can also tell you a little bit about, like if you're going to have that employee sponsored plan and you already know what plan that is, so you know it's a, you know, Cigna Gold, and you can kind of see where that falls. So it'll say if you did Cigna Gold, that's going to be great for medical, but maybe not so much for pharmacy because it's going to show you every single medication and where it falls on their formulary. So it's really one of the only ways to get an inside look at these formularies. Unbiased too, because I'd say start there. They give you plan information too. They give you star ratings for each of these plans. So it'll say, like, you know, well, this looks great because it's only $20 a month, but they have a 2.5 star rating and it goes up to 5. So you can kind of almost see how they're rated, and that's based on some other quality standards and measures, both for pharmacies are graded on it, health plans are graded, as well as you know, a lot of primary care. So it kind of helps consolidate it.
That was Medicare.gov.
Medicare.gov.
And that's great. And they, you know, you can talk to brokers. You know, brokers they get paid off commissions. So that's always true with anything. So you kind of look at that. One of the things that I think it's important to look at too is where are they as far as their health. If they're at a point where they're having hospitalizations and needing rehab, you really want to pay attention to what kind of rehab benefit, because when I talked about the 20 days paid in full and then there's another 80, there's a copay on those 80 days of $164.50. I think that's right, maybe 167 now a day. And your supplemental coverage is going to cover all or part of that. And also, nursing homes, rehab facilities prefer they prefer a traditional Medicare plan and a supplement over a replacement. So those are the issues that like you can't, I mean, how do you get that information? I don't know, but brokers have a tendency to know those kinds of things. So that's,
Do you have advice on that?
Yeah, that's a lot of what I deal with all the time is like trying to help these people once they've been kind of suckered into these managed care plans.
Yes.
Because the problem is they'll sell them a great bill of goods, like it's gonna be cheap and, you know, your doctors are covered and you won't have to pay a copay, and it all sounds well and good until mom falls and breaks a hip. And then they only wanna give her 20 days and she doesn't have a supplemental insurance and she goes home and she's not ready and she falls again and then repeats the cycle. So what I always tell everybody is hey, when you get to retirement age, you know, when I'm talking to the kids, when I'm working, you know, with the older adults is, you know, when you're young, get it when you're young. Do traditional Medicare with an AARP plan because it's gonna stay that way. Second, you know, they might have a incremental increase as you get older just because the plans get, you know, I mean, people need more care and sometimes they raise their rates a little bit. But you're not gonna be looking at paying, you know, when you're 70 and you've had 2 hospitalizations, they make you wait 60 to 90 days before they'll even sign you up for a supplemental if you don't have one. You have to be out, you can't go to the hospital for anything. And then they're gonna charge you double what they would charge somebody at the age of retirement because you're at higher risk. So
and like you were mentioning, young in this scenario, 65 is usually the age of retirement. That's the first you could qualify. So the earlier you do it, the lower your monthly copay. Yeah.
So speaking of getting insurance at an earlier age, Billy, can you come up and talk about the long-term care insurance that is offered through Norton Healthcare? This was something that I think a lot of folks are not aware, and those of us who are Norton employees, we should all be taking advantage of this. I'm looking at myself in the mirror. So, Billy, can you talk about that?
Yeah, so our policy that we offer is through Unum. It is a long-term care policy. It can be used for in-home. It can be used facility, as long as it's not independent, like what was said up here. The cost is derived depending on the younger you get it, the better the price, obviously, correct? Just like a whole life insurance policy or a life insurance policy. But there's 2 factors that go along with it. So how long do you want the insurance? You can get it for 3 years, you can get it for 6 years, or you can get it for a lifetime. And the other factor that goes into is how much monthly coverage do you want? Which it goes from anywhere from 3,000 all the way up to 10,000. And like great facts here about the average cost with that. So the better, or the sooner you get it, the better. The great thing about Norton is that we allow us to get it for ourselves, we can get it for our kids, and we can get it for our parents. Yeah, and not a lot of people know that.
What about friends or people on panels?
Nice try.
Bill, if you leave employment with Norton Healthcare, can you carry that forward, or do you lose that opportunity?
That's the best thing, yeah. So you can take it with you and it stays the exact same rate. Shut your mouth. So that's the great thing about that.
In-laws, did you say also in-laws, or no, does it have to be your parent?
Parents.
Parents, not in-laws.
In-laws, I do not think so. I'll
But you
double
can do
check on that.
spouse.
Do spouse, you can do your kids, you can do your parents, you can do grandkids. With the whole life insurance, you can do grandkids too. So this is something that I'm glad you're doing this for sure, because this is the #1 thing that is not taken advantage of at all. Most of the time so what I do is I come around and I talk to you all about your benefits once a year. And this is my
Magic time right now.
busiest time in the world. So it's great to be here. And I can handle all your benefits that you need. But with this one, the #1 response I get to people is, hey, do you have a plan as far as long-term care? It's like, well, I'm not old enough yet. Okay, yeah, you are, first of all. And most of the time it's like, oh, okay, so I can get it for my parents, yeah. Well, I'll just worry about that later when I'm like 70 or 80. Well, guess what? By the time you get there, the rates, forget about it.
So question,
Yep.
do most large companies do that same thing? carry it on once you
pretty
leave?
generous.
Because I don't think that's.
Most of the time, no. But what we do is we used to have benefit fairs from work, like companies like Aflac and Unum and Humana and whatever would come in and they would sell us our benefits. So 5 years ago, we created this department to where we're all licensed to actually do all of their jobs. So we don't have a broker coming in trying to sell you something. I don't care if you get it or not. I just want you to be covered and be what's best for you is what I care about.
So can you tell us just a general idea of how much it costs? I know that there are
You're
different
gonna say
plans.
that.
Just like
There's a website that we have that you plug in your age, you plug in how much you want per month, and you plug in how long of a duration you want, and you can play with that, and you can see how much the premium is.
And what's that website?
Because I signed my husband and I up 3 years ago.
What's that?
I signed my husband and I up for 3 years ago, and the premiums are very reasonable.
Does it have a, do you have to get screened or,
Yeah,
there's an
application process. It's pretty intensive for what we're used to. As far as the Norton employees, all of our benefits are based upon our average age. We're a large group. Most of our employees are younger, not allowed in 1978, like I said earlier. So this is the most invasive one. You can speak to that. It's not too invasive. They want to know your drugs, what medications you're on, your doctors. I think it's 12 months, the last 12 months medical records.
It was very simple. Did they do blood work?
No.
Oh, no, that's, yeah.
Can you get to it off the inside?
What's that?
Can you get to it off the inside?
Yes. What I can do is I've got my business card back here, or if we've got a manifest of email addresses or whatever, I can send it out to everybody. So we could do that. And I've got my business cards back here. Feel free to shoot me an email and I can email it back to you, whether it's this or if you want open enrollment questions too.
What if I just signed up for my benefits like yesterday and I've already
Too late,
done
you're
it?
done forever.
No. Can I change it for this coming year or do I have to wait now some?
So the great thing about this too is you can enroll anytime.
Okay.
Anytime you want to. So it's not just an open enrollment thing. So get through open enrollment and then we can sit down and we can go through it all together. And if you want to do it now, that's fine. There is, most of the time with these supplemental insurances, it takes a month for them to process. This one takes 2 months. So that's one thing.
And this, it's long-term care, right?
Mhm.
Okay, my daughter works for you all, but I live in Florida, so can I still use it?
Yep.
Okay.
Sure can.
This is like the greatest benefit ever, and we aren't knowing about it.
Yeah, it's
or
the
taking advantage of it.
percentage-wise, I'm on camera. So,
Do you need a stack of elder laws?
we don't.
You guys are breaking from?
So the other insurances and stuff, we track to see where everybody's in line with. So it's the critical illness that we all know about, or the accident, or the medical, or people using that, or people using the high deductible as opposed to the healthy living. This one, we don't ever talk about, because it is so rare that people have, to be perfectly honest.
But
So we
there's
just-
other insurances that you offer as well like the cancer insurance and other insurances that would benefit you as well.
Yeah.
So if you make an appointment with you, you can walk us through all those different things that she talked about?
Yep.
He does a great job. He does it.
Yes, yes. So, yeah, for Norton folks
I'll pay you
also,
later.
what benefits do, like he comes, Billy comes, I think he comes to my office tomorrow, I don't know if it's you or somebody from your offices, at our foundation office, and we set up the entire day, and we just have appointment. We wear them out. And, but it's really helpful, so we can get it done, so we're all not trying to remember, oh, I need to schedule an appointment, that we just do it as a staff, and that's really helpful. So I know you all have done it for us, so I'm sure you do it for others, so if your department is not doing that, I encourage you to explore that, because that's really helpful.
Definitely.
So,
Yeah.
more information, you've got information on long-term care insurance in the back.
Yeah, I've got
And we will
information
get
on our
into that.
actual individual policy. I brought a few copies of that. I've got a copy of, you know what, I may have the website on that piece of paper. Now I think about it. Paramount, I've been going open enrollment, appointment, 26 people today, see. So, so I've got that, I just printed it off before I came over here, so. But definitely take advantage of us for sure. I come out to apartments every day, and I'm there for sometimes I'm there for 2 hours, sometimes I'm there for 10. And our goal is to see everybody once a year. Good stuff happens, things change, you forget about this, you forget about the critical illness credit, and so definitely take advantage of us.
I want to be mindful of time, so I just want, unless there is a just critical question. Oh, there's one critical question.
I just want to ask one question. If your parent does have liquid assets that will carry on several years, and they also have a home, is it better to sell the home, or is it better to rent the home?
You know, that's one of the things that we sit down and kind of look from a cash flow perspective. We look at their investments, we usually involve their financial advisor and have them come in. We look at the cost of maintaining the home, how much can you get to rent it, you know. Getting the rent is great. The managing the property can be not so great. And it depends on whether do you want to be a landlord? You know, that's a whole different thing. So we just kind of look at those different factors and we see, because sometimes some people have a grandson who wants to live in the house while they're going through college, and they seem decently responsible, and so we're okay with them, you know, renting out. So that might be fine, whereas we don't want to necessarily manage it for strangers to be renting. But it's all just kind of pieces of the puzzle. So we take in all these different people and look and see what we got and how we're going to use it to arrange it the best way to make sure that we can meet those needs.
Because if they do spend out their money, then they have 6 months to sell it.
That's right.
That's what you said?
Mm-hmm. So
is
it's
that
6 months.
for every state, or?
It is. So it's 6 months from the time we are institutionalized. I hate that word, but it's the technical word they use. But in a facility. So they don't give you a ton of time. You can get more time by signing a letter that says I intend to return home, even if it's not necessarily so true. I hate to say that, but you know, it's a way to get basically an extension. And as long as you're showing good faith that you're trying to sell it, you're okay. Medicaid's not going to get mad at you. You have to be asking for a fair market value. But you know, if the house has like a ton of wood paneling and they have an incontinent dog and we've got all kinds of issues, you're going to have a hard time selling the property, and that takes a while.
I just want to say thank you. Please join me in thanking our panel.